Hello and welcome to another episode. This time around, I've got something special. Namely, a couple of months ago, I got asked whether I wanted to write an essay for an upcoming book. It's a collection of essays on, well, hormones, puberty, and lots of related stuff. And they wanted to have someone in there also who wrote about intersex, which is what I wrote about. So the book, I've received my own copy. It's called So Hormonal. It's by Monstrous Regiment. It's a Scottish publisher, and yeah, it's writing this essay and working to get it edited and published was quite a nice experience. Um, and I would like to read the essay I wrote, just in case you're not buying the entire book, just to read that one. So, and maybe you still will. I won't judge. So, without further ado, I will read it now, and I hope you like it. The puberty that wasn't supposed to exist. Growing up is something that most children look forward to no longer be seen as a child or be held back by age restrictions. Becoming a teenager and going through puberty almost feels like a special initiation ceremony, with fact and rumor mingling as the other children discuss among themselves what they'll be facing. I remember the Your Body During Puberty books that we had access to during primary school, with crude drawings of the male and female body. These books described how our bodies would transform into either form, depending on what genitals we were born with. Growing up in the Netherlands, there wasn't the feeling that one should be ashamed of this process, nor be ashamed of having genitals. And so I perceived puberty as something that I would be glad to go through, as another step in the process of becoming a grown-up. What actually happened to me, however, was beyond confusing and defied everything that I had read or been told about puberty. My expectation was that I would find myself going through a male-style puberty on account of having been born with the required dangling bits. The explosion of body and facial hair, the breaking of the voice, and a host of other changes. But my voice never did break, and the facial and body hair never made it past a serious fuss. This was mildly confusing, to say the least. It was also unusual that I had a sudden beginning of breast growth when I was 11 years old, an episode of severe abdominal cramping that had me basically unable to walk and move for at least an hour. When my parents found me during that episode, my dad had to carry me downstairs while my parents prepared to get me to the local doctor. Unfortunately, by the time that we got to the doctor, the pain had subsided, and instead of an examination, I got a pat on the head and was returned home. There, my dad told me that he didn't appreciate it if I faked being in pain just for attention. This warning really stuck with me, and for the coming years, every time I experienced discomfort or pain in the abdomen or perineum, I would ignore it. As I watched my fellow students during primary school and onward transform into regular teenage guys and girls, I felt only more confused and lost. I knew on some level that my body wasn't following either of these courses, but I found myself unable to put it into words. My body definitely was changing, but it seemed to want to neither transform into a man or a woman, putting only a half-hearted effort into either direction. Unable to do anything with this observation, I put it to the side and just tried to live my life. This turned out to be a pretty miserable experience, with my environment also struggling to make sense of what was happening to my body. As I moved through puberty, I got identified as a young woman instead of a young man more and more frequently, with some people bluntly asking me whether I was a woman or a man. This seemed to be due to my physical appearance, not matching up to my male clothing and male haircut. When I let my hair grow out by the end of high school, ironically to look tougher as a guy, I ended up being seen only as a woman. It would take many more years after finishing high school before I was able to put a name to these experiences. While struggling through conflicting feelings about my body and how I should behave, I became aware of myself trying to appear to others like a woman, rather than a man. This confused me, leading me to consider the question of whether I felt like or wanted to be a man or a woman. It had become clear to me that ever since puberty began, I had not tried to pick a side, so to say. Initially, this led me to believe that I was transsexual, as this was the only thing that I knew of at the time that would make me want to be a woman when I was obviously male. Yet within a week, I had come across a new term, intersex, with a whole range of body configurations and medical terms accompanying it. Remembering all my confusion and troubles with my body over the years, I began to suspect that I might be a true hermaphrodite, with both male and female stem cells and reproductive organs. Going from a theory about one's body and finding the medical attention that would help to either prove or disprove the theory turned out to be much more complicated than I had thought. While I managed to get into contact with the largest gender team in the Netherlands at a VUMC hospital, they didn't seem excited about my intersex theory. They supposedly ran a hormone level test on a blood sample and told me that I had normal male hormone levels. Their gynecologist prodded and poked at me for a bit and told me that he saw no sign of me being intersex. Their psychologist kept asking me why I was even there if I was not ready to admit to being transsexual, since I clearly wasn't intersex. There were a few years of this, with the intermission at the psychiatrist who, during the first appointment, told me that I was deceiving myself about being intersex. They later told me that I should just pretend to be transsexual at the gender team to get the surgery and hormone therapy. At the last psychologist appointment with the VUMC gender team, all previous promises were withdrawn about speeding up the protocol. Something broke inside of me. I cancelled all of my outstanding appointments at the VUMC gender team and left the hospital to find my own path instead. A few months later, I had an MRI scan performed at a German private clinic. This was my first MRI scan ever, and when I sat next to a flabbergasted and very excited radiologist shortly afterwards, it felt like vindication in so many ways. As the radiologist pointed out the closed-off vagina in my abdomen and a non-existent prostate, it felt like the first time that a medical professional had been truly honest with me. That same year I had also begun hormone therapy, because I felt that pushing my body towards the development of further female secondary characteristics made the most sense. I had to order these hormones via internet, because I had no doctor who would prescribe them to me. With grudging support from a local GP to have blood tests performed, I was able to deduce the dose of testosterone blockers and estradiol needed to get a female hormone balance. This also gave me a first glimpse into my true, natural hormone balance. My testosterone levels were less than 25% of the lower range of male levels, and estradiol levels were low for a woman, but high for a man. With things seemingly headed in the right direction, I passed the MRI findings to my GP, which led to them being sent to the VUMC gender team. However, they concluded that they could see no unusual anatomy on their MRI images. Following this were a few more years of back and forth between Dutch hospitals and multiple MRI scans being made with inconsistent results. One Dutch specialist diagnosed me as suffering from autoparaginecophilia, the delusion of thinking that I look female, when in fact I do not. During the appointment leading up to that conclusion, a female urologist was invited in to help examine me. Her first words when she saw me upon entering the room were, "She really does look like a girl." During all of the years that I had visited hospitals, there was always the point where I found myself sitting in the waiting room, with a call out for a Mr. Posh, followed by a stammering and confused assistant trying to make sense of their expectations and what their eyes were telling them. Back around 2008, I managed to get my official name changed from my original male name to the new female name. The judge found no flaw with the argument, and photograph of me supplied by my lawyer, approving the name change based on my female appearance. This of course did not fix the confusion around my appearance when my official gender came into play, as illustrated by the constant humiliations in waiting rooms. Making no progress with getting any sensible answers out of medical professionals, I decided that maybe changing my official gender was easier. For this, Dutch law required that I had to have both testicles removed. Since doing so, elective orchiectomy was not allowed under Dutch law, I found a willing German surgeon via a transsexual friend. This surgeon performed not only the orchiectomy, but also did an exploratory surgery of the perineum, during which he confirmed the entrance of a vagina. Lacking the skills to perform the reconstructive surgery required to affix the vagina to the perineum, he closed it back up. The biopsy on the removed testicles showed that they were largely undeveloped, which explains why they produced only small amounts of testosterone. The resulting letter from this surgeon allowed me to file to have my official gender changed, using a never-before-used Dutch law from the 1980s that allows intersex people who were born with both sets of genitals to take on their preferred gender. Like with my name change, this all happened without any hearing, and his lawyer too was surprised at how easily it went. The case even got Dutch media attention, with a national broadcaster dropping by to hold an interview for the news and a number of newspapers reporting on it. As far as the Dutch medical professionals went, they kept denying that they could be intersex, and that was that. I eventually moved to Germany, where after a few years I began to notice some curious changes to my body, including a vertical brown stripe, the linea nigra, on my abdomen that is mostly associated with pregnancies. With assistance from a doctor at the local medical center, it was determined that the problem was that my body had begun to produce more female hormones, which together with a low-dose estradiol hormone therapy I was taking, was causing me to suffer an estradiol overdose. After terminating the hormone therapy completely, the linea nigra vanished after a few months, and I was free of the hormone therapy which I had assumed I would be on for the rest of my life. Instead, I now seem to have a natural, regular female hormone cycle. In addition to this, I also noticed the continuation of the development of female secondary characteristics, most noticeably with my breasts, as I shot up more than one bra size. This is basically the stage where I am today, with my puberty having more or less completed after over 2 decades. My body is now essentially female, with the addition of a penis and a closed-off vagina. During each monthly cycle, I suffer the usual pains on one side of the abdomen and some cramping and pain in the perineum, as has apparently been the norm since I was 11 years old. What I have found is that despite the help I did receive in Germany, there is no use in me trying to find medical help, including diagnostics and reconstructive surgery, after spending 15 years searching for it. I have found no support networks for intersex people and no intersex organizations, even when some claim to be. In the Netherlands, the gender teams prefer to use the non-medical term disorders of sex development, DSD, instead of intersex, which would imply a severe medical defect instead of the benign medical condition that most intersex conditions are. In Germany, the DSD term is also used, along with the more general rare disease, as I noticed again with the recent attempt at a German hospital. Although at this point I've learned a lot about my body and I'm no longer bound to hormone therapy, the past years have been hugely traumatic to me. Nobody should suffer this kind of treatment at the hands of so-called medical professionals and psychologists. Gender teams should not force intersex people to believe that they are actually transsexual. Doctors should also not operate on intersex infants to erase the ambiguous genitals like they are some kind of horrible defect. I was lucky that my vagina was not open at birth, or I would likely have grown up wondering about an odd scar on my abdomen, like so many others. Yet despite all the positive things that have happened over the years, to know that I can never trust doctors and psychologists again, that society sees us intersex people more as curiosities and freaks than as functional human beings, all of that is very tough to accept. I once imagined that I could have had reconstructive surgery to have the vagina reconnected to the perineum and labia reconstructed out of the now useless remnants of the scrotum, so that I could live the rest of my life as a healthy, hermaphroditic woman. That now seems like a foolish dream. And I instead have to accept that every month fluids are draining into my abdomen for later reabsorption, as if my abdomen is some kind of sanitary pad. Never getting those last answers about my body, having my body referred to as a medical disorder, and accepting that I'm not worthy of medical help. Those are the toughest things about growing up like this. Although my mother and a number of other people along the way accepted me without question and helped me in any way they could, ultimately, the medical system refused to yield. I'm still trying to change this somehow. Not just for myself, but for others like me. To finally make the world see that we, too, are human beings. That our bodies aren't shameful or wrong. That no matter what our bodies look like or how we feel, it is simply what and who we are. The overly simplified representation in the books we were given to read as children of humans being one of binary doesn't do anyone a service. All our bodies are unique, because DNA and hormones aren't binary. The only thing that is binary are societal gender roles, which is the thing that seems to have had the biggest impact on my puberty. Regressive values and views seem to have led to the reality of my body being pushed away, to be replaced with a more convenient reality for society. I began to write my autobiography a number of years ago, after having been contacted by a publisher. Now that things have quieted down somewhat for me, I hope to have it soon finished and published. My wish is that it will allow others to read about my experiences and make up their own mind about what it means to them and to society as a whole. Navigating puberty is tough enough without the added complication of working out what it means to be intersex without the right help. Thank you for listening. This was my essay. I hope you liked it. Until the next time, and take care.